Ben, we haven't done drawings for a little while. That's
No,
harking
that's
back to
great.
the pre-COVID days.
No, that's good. You can check out the YouTube channel and all the training that we've done over the journey. There's lots of us on butcher's paper scribbling out some
And
ideas
on
and
Facebook as
concepts.
well.
Yeah, so that's very true. So check them out where you can. Hey, congratulations, Simone, in terms of single mum, school teacher. So I mean, what a contribution you're making to the future generation of Australians. Uh, you know, uh, this is a classic case. If it is to be, it's up to me. Taking ownership of your future. So I just want to do a huge shout out to you for taking action
Yes.
and getting the job done. Look, you're in a terrific position, irrespective of whether the so-called debt retirement is 74 in terms of doing your numbers. There's a few questions in there that you had. Let's start with the first one. The $2,000 a week is obviously a target, right? And it's set in present value terms. So even though we would model that in future forecasted terms and in future value terms, we do bring that back to net present value terms. So it is the equivalent of catering for indexation, which is inflation, right? So, in other words, the value of money over time goes down because of inflation or indexation. So, we need to make sure that we're keeping up with the purchasing power of that money. So, we always talk about the $2,000 a week that will be available in future value terms, but back to the net present value, which is the $2,000 a week. Okay, so we've got that out of the way in terms of how this will happen for you. So there's obviously levers that we can pull. You got the 5 properties, you want to get down to 3. So that does give us 2 properties that we potentially can divest of over a period of time. Now, the message here is simple. Try and hold on to as many of those properties for as long as you can, because when you actually do hit your retirement age and move into pension phase, you've got a lot of choices in terms of liquid money. So there are choices around accessing super. There are other choices. So what we would say when you're landing the plane at that time is how much available liquid money do you have? That's why we always set up offset buckets. And we always talk about in our models, and hopefully you've got access to our course that unpacks the book case studies that we've done. And whenever we get down to $100,000 in liquid cash, that triggers we need to do something to either sell a property, which then lifts that amount up even higher than that and pays down debt. Because the longer you can hold on to appreciating assets, the better this story gets. And I suspect over time, because when you've got money invested, it's compounding. So that's something that I would like you to sort of get a better understanding of in terms of as it's compounding. Bryce mentioned this in one of the other examples that we did earlier today, is the value of that property. The more it goes up, usually the rents will move in sync with that. And so you're able to charge higher rents, which means ultimately the debt should be able to be paid down as well. So you should be using around 2.5% to 3% in terms of longer term inflation. And that will sort of give you that idea in terms of what it's going to look like. But you're in a great position. I don't think there's anything to worry about. 46 years of age, you've got another decade to just focus on debt. What would I do about focusing on debt? I'd try and look at my insurance policies. I'd see if I can get a bulk discount for those insurance policies. I think you definitely need to keep your properties insured, but we know insurance costs have gone up significantly, as is obviously interest cost. So trying to get them down and negotiate those down. You should always be making sure that you are assessing your asking rents, making sure that they're at market, because we definitely know that rents are going higher at the moment. So, and it's about time, because for the last decade prior to this uplift, rents have been underperforming inflation. So we're just basically getting back to the normal trend in terms of rent charges against value of those properties. So there's just a couple of things to consider, Bryce. What have you got?
Again, I just want to reinforce the point that you said before. Um, we are talking about $2,000 a week as it stands here today, so it has meaning, right? And
Yeah,
currently, $2,000 a week is still considered more than the Australian Super Financial
yeah.
Association for a
Comfortable retirement.
couple to be comfortable, ASFA,
Yeah,
right? So $2,000 a week today is still higher than that benchmark, right? And at some point in the future, $2,000 a week will need to be adjusted to 2.5. Okay, so we get that. But the point is, whenever we're saying 2,000, it means the purchasing power of today, 2,000, And when we have projected you to retire in the future, it is actually more than 2,000 at that time. But it won't have any significant meaning, because if we say it's $3,339, Ben, you will automatically say, well, what's the borrowing power that I have right now for 3,300? So you'll lose context.
Yeah.
So we always bring it back to present value as we see it, as it comes out of our mouth. And at some point in the future, we'll need to update that to 2.5. But right now, 2,000 is still enough. That's number one. Number two, this is a really good question, Simone, and I just want to tip my hat too. A single mum with 5 properties, taking action, school teacher. Wow. Okay, triple tick for that. Beautiful. Well done. We've got 4 foundational pillars that we want you to master: asset selection A, borrowing power B, cash flow management C, defense D. C, we have said from the very first episode of this podcast, is the hardest one to master, because there are so many moving parts that you need to consider. So your assumptions here that you won't pay it off until you're 74, we say, how detailed have you looked under the bonnet to work out if that's realistic? Is that still taking into account any rises in the rent that you're going to experience? Does that take into account the long-term average for interest rates? Does that take into account any, does that mean the income that you're on now based on what income you might experience as a increase over time too? So I would say that great that you know what it looks like at 74. You want to bring it down to 65, but it's not until you actually get an opportunity to play with the what ifs that give you that sort of peace of mind and clarity. So therefore, your question here, at the end, you said it's really hard to forecast inflation. Yep, get it. It's actually really hard to forecast any of your financial goals beyond 5 years, if we're honest, because of so many of the moving parts that happen in the future. So I would say to you that that planning is the next step, because if you're at peak purchasing and you want to divest down to 3 and you want to get a real line of sight on the future, just getting real clarity around your numbers really is kind of the next step. We spend most of this audience trying to get people out of action inertia, where they don't do anything. So hopefully we get them. We encourage them to buy an investment property or buy a second investment property. In your case, there is no action inertia to even discuss here, because you've done it and you've been through a significant life event as well, having to be a single parent. So, with all that said, with all that Ben said as well, I think the final piece for you is just to get some help around that cash flow planning, because that may just be the bit that unlocks it for you. That may be the bit that gives you the confidence, to Ben's point, to keep the 5 instead of going down to the 3. Or equally, it might actually give you some valuable intel and some insights that actually 3 is a good plan. And there's a bunch of reasons why you should consider the 3 as being part of your plan going forward. But folks, for the rest of the community listening to this is a really awesome exercise for you to all land the learnings here, that this is the game that we're playing, right? There is no one size fits all here.
Nope.
What applies to Simone might not apply to you. So it's not only just the accumulation of these properties over time, but it's actually finding out what money game you're playing, because that money game that you're playing is different to your neighbor, the person down the street, the property investor that's 2 suburbs away. We're all playing totally different games. And so this is just evidence of the game that Simone's playing. And she's playing to the detail that we have available to us, Ben. She's playing a really good game. So she should be really stoked and proud of herself. But for me, to answer your query, to give you the more value, and if I had a piece of butcher's paper here, Ben, I'd write A, B, C, D on it, and I'd circle the C, and I'd go get super clear on your numbers, because that's the next step for you.